meeting in order. All those who stand, please do so and say the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
All board members are present this evening.
All right. Consent agenda approval. Would you like to make a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Support. Moved and supported. Vote please.
Diane? Sorry.
Yes, Tim?
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, whose phone was that?
Brand's
Nice job, Nancy, you're the coach.
motion carries.
I don't know. We didn't approve the agenda.
We need to approve the agenda. I missed that
It's
one.
okay, so I thought that's what we were doing.
No. Yeah.
Well, we did it, we moved forward 554. Okay, we'll need an approval of the agenda.
I would move to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Okay, moved and supported. Vote please.
Mrs. Chenoweth?
Yes.
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 Motion carries.
All right, next item, announcements and information inquiry. We got a pretty good list of stuff here. For those that are interested, we hope will, especially if you're a voter in our community, it would make a difference. There's a medical marijuana public meeting on March 29th at 7 p.m. at 59 West. It will be in the East Ballroom, which is in the back east side of the building. It'll be a conversation about medical marijuana, and the intent is to get the public aware of what the state has been doing in terms of new laws, and we're going to leave it at that. If you're interested, please show up at the meeting. Huron Valley Egg Hunt at Duck Lake Pines Park is April 8th from 10 to 12:30. The Township Board Trustee meeting scheduled for April 12th has been rescheduled to April 26th. Compost pickup will begin April 7th. Township offices are closed for Good Friday on April 14th. Hazardous Waste Day event at Milford High School will be April 29th from 8 to 12 p.m. So I did say that correctly. It's Milford High School. It's not going to be out to the north of here. Then we received a RAP grant from MMRMA, which is our insurance companies, and that was to cover the cameras and stuff at the Duck Lake Pines Park. Anybody have any public comment? Yes.
I just had looked into, we had several people ask at our other meeting about us going into closed session at the beginning of the meeting and leaving people waiting. And I did pull up the regulations for closed session, and it really doesn't specify when. I know we put it sometimes because it's pending business, and if we are gonna take action on something after, we have to have it in open session. But I was wondering if we could consider, maybe talk to Gary about, even if we were gonna be, making a motion afterwards, if we could move it possibly to the end of the agenda and let people know we will be making a motion, and then those people could stay if they chose. But if the rest of the meeting could go first, if somebody, didn't wanna stay, just something for us to consider, because I didn't see anywhere in, the Open Meetings Act where it said that it had to be, at the beginning of the meeting, just that any, motions have to be made in open session.
Right. At the end of the meeting, the last meeting on the 8th, Gary did come up to me, our attorney, and said that no, you do not have to have it at the beginning
Okay.
or the middle.
All right.
So you can place it to accommodate.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be a motion to do so. We can just reorganize unless everybody wants to make a policy out of it.
Oh, it's just already.
It allows for flexibility to be able to move things around. All right, any other public
Hello,
comment?
can I add something to that too? I would like to see us too, and that when we have people with presentations or something that's going, recognitions, and sometimes they get buried down the agenda, have all that right at the very beginning of the meeting, which I think we do a pretty good job, but sometimes they get kind of buried, and they're waiting for a while, not that it's not important, in great English, but to be here for the meeting, to see other stuff, but sometimes that's the only reason they're here. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and I think it's, I think it's just unfair, so I'd like to see that, we pay attention to that too, and make sure it's going to go.
Okay, so, to show that we're already on top of that,
Yep,
if you look at this agenda.
I see it.
So that's exactly what we did, is we didn't wanna torture anybody, have our auditors here tonight that are gonna torture us. And we have, some representatives from the community roundtable that are not gonna torture us. Did I do that right there? No, we've had the auditors in all week, so, any other public comment? All right, what we're gonna do then is we're gonna move on to the presentations. And, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do, presentation from the community roundtable. And, so, Judy, would you like to do some introductions?
Sure. Maybe first off, we introduce everybody that's part of the community roundtable. The community roundtable is made up of all the partners in the township, plus we have about 5 citizen representatives. So what we've done for the past 3 years is talk about how we can partner together to make the community a stronger, more vibrant place to live. So most of that conversation has centered around communication, and our next step is moving towards branding the partners. So it wouldn't take away like the township logo that you can see all over all of our maps and everything, but the pine tree, that will stay and that will identify the township itself. But this brand would go between all the partners. And Diane has written the presentation that you're gonna see in a few minutes here, and that will explain how that works a little bit. But first of all, I would like to introduce everybody from the community roundtable that's here. If you'd stand up and introduce yourself and just kind of talk about what your place in that community roundtable is. Right, you wanna start?
Lieutenant Matt Snyder with the Sheriff's Office, and I bring the law enforcement aspect to the roundtable for the community.
Ken Chapman, Fire Department. I bring the fire aspect of it. Thanks, you made it easy.
Missy Dasovich, represents the Highland Downtown Development Authority at the Community Roundtable.
Diane Pearson, I'm one of several citizens at large.
Roscoe Smith, Planning Commission.
Nancy Branstetter, I'm a citizen at large and I'm the editor of the Spinal Column.
Jude Halloran, the director of the Highland Township Public Library. I have to say I've been really impressed by how dedicated and committed everybody in the meeting is to making Highland a great place to live.
Thank you.
And I'm Tammy Flowers, I'm the clerk.
Rick Hamel, Township Supervisor.
And Judy Cooper, I bring the money aspect. One of the things that I always feel like if you're doing the right thing, the right things will come to you. And we have been so fortunate with this group, the talent that is on that group. We have Amy Grisomkowski from the Business Association. Amy has a marketing background. Roscoe has a marketing and advertising background. Diane Pearson has a communications background. She worked for U of M in communications. And Nancy Branstetter was, she has a communications background as well. So, and represents the paper for the Spinal Column too. So, feel really, really lucky to work with all these people. We've kind of bonded and are definitely moving things forward. So on that note, Miss Diane, take it away.
Okay.
Diane, I'm gonna be your clicker, so.
Oh, you're going to be my clicker?
So
Okay.
you need to let me know when to click.
Okay. So as Judy said, I'm going to be making hopefully a short presentation tonight, going over some things that we would like to accomplish in the next 2 years. However, we're going to need some additional help, and this is where our presentation comes in. One of the things I'd like to mention, going forward with this presentation, if you have any questions, just jot them down and one of us will handle them at the end of tonight's meeting. So, okay, up to this point, basically we have achieved, I would say, over the last 2.5 years, what I would call quick wins. We've used the resources at hand to get some of our goals taken care of, and we've primarily worked on communications, but it's a fairly broad aspect, and so we've tried to work on as many things as we can. However, we are now up to the point where we're really facing our biggest goal, which is our biggest challenge, and that is one that we were charged with, which is to bring neighborliness and a closer knit community. And so one of the things that we have tried to get across is over the last 8 months, rather than just plowing ahead with this, I would say our group has spent quite a bit of time in preparation for how we want to move forward. And by that I mean we've done massive amount of research, we've had meetings and given information and our opinions and so forth to actually get where we are today. And so, as Judy mentioned, in order to actually move forward on this goal of much broader communication, community cohesiveness, and neighborliness, we would like to proceed with a place branding project. And what this will do, hopefully, is it's a branding. Place branding is specific to geographical locations. Communities use these, states, countries, tourist areas, to get better known, more cohesive, put out the word what's unique about their particular area or community. So, different than product branding, because product branding has a much narrower focus and you have a much more controlled focus with what you want to say about your products. Okay. So, how are we going to make this happen? Well, as Judy mentioned, we have a lot of expertise on this committee, but we do not have a professional place branding consultant. And so what we want to do is have a consultant come in to help us develop a place brand for Highland Township. And what we're going to do is the basic first task to doing any other activities is going to be developing this place brand. But before that has to happen, we had to figure out, does Highland Township have what's called a strong sense of place? And this is kind of I found out from doing a lot of research, sort of a new term. Sense of place is what are all the unique things about a particular location or community? What kinds of physical features do they have? How do people think of the community? What kinds of culture do we have? What activities do we have? What types of things do we get involved in and advertise and try and bring people together within the community? So all of this, the sense of place, is what makes a particular surrounding, physical surroundings, worth it. And why do people care about it? There are 3 building blocks that have to be in place before you can actually move on and do a place brand. These are memorable physical characteristics, people's emotions, and the culture. And when I say here on this, including food, I was thinking of the Highland pickle. So we may have other food, but that was the memorable one. So anyway, all of these 3 building blocks contribute to the place brand. What we did to determine if Highland has a strong sense of place is we came together and we assembled photos and we said, okay, does this tell what Highland's about? Well, I started out with the first set of photos and what I thought Highland represented to me. Now, other people said, well, no, but I think of this and I think of this. So It's like, okay, we're coming at this from very different aspects, and that is what a place brand is all about. Everyone has a different idea about the community, but you have to put all of that together to actually develop what is your place brand. So let's take a look here. These are just a few selected photos that we put together. These are the ones that we selected to represent our physical characteristics. The next one is a set of photos to represent our emotions, and you'll notice we have lakes, we have photos about veterans, dancing, people contributing to the landscaping. And then the third one is about our culture. So we have parades here, we have Santa Claus, we have all kinds of activities and cultures and things of that nature. So these were all the things that we put together, just a small selection. And our conclusion then, once we had all these together, was, yes, Highland does in fact have a strong sense of place. Therefore, we have that base set, and from now we can go ahead and try and develop a place brand, but it has to be done by an expert. And by showing this funnel, we're trying to represent putting all of the different aspects that people think about Highland Township, and I kind of think of it as boiling it down, but the funnel still shows the same thing. You come out with a brand for the community, and the person that converts this brand, who has been developing the brand and taking into account all these different opinions, is the branding consultant. He or she is the one that gives voice to the brand. And when I say voice to the brand, I mean this person comes up with the logo, comes up with a tagline, comes up with the brand standards. Logo, simply a visual representation of the community or what it stands for. The tagline goes hand in hand with that. They're not individual aspects. And then the brand standards are simply a set of guidelines that tell how the logo and the tagline are to be consistently used by anyone. So it's like it would say, what is the color, what is the font, what is the typeface, that type of thing. Okay, so this is what's needed to actually create a place brand for Highland. And just to explain to you a little bit more, Judy mentioned this before, but the place brand is like an umbrella over the entire community. It represents the whole community. Under that umbrella is Highland Township's official seal, which is government business only. That's the only way it can be used. Then we also have partners logos, such as Missy with the DDA and other of our partners, the library and so forth. They have their own logos and their own taglines. And some of our events and activities may also have a logo. And all this falls under this big place brand. So what we do then is the partners continue to use their brand, but may choose to use the place brand or Highlands community brand along with their own. So what we will do then is we discussed, well, how are we envisioning this all to pan out? It is not a fast process. So we are looking to hire, or would like to hire, a place branding consultant that would start this year and simply do that basic bottom line for the place brand, the basic building blocks. Come up with a place brand, do the logo, the tagline, and the brand standards. If that goes well enough, it's conceivable that in 2018 or latter part of 2017, we will actually then be able to go ahead, build a website for the Place brand, do a Facebook page, and do other collateral marketing. What that is at this point in time, it's just too early to even tell you what that might be. So benefits of branding basically boils down to it is a thing that builds relationships and it unifies the community. And I'll have to tell you one additional thing here is the fact that just the process of going through Place branding and working on this with a consultant and whatever process he or she chooses to use, that in itself starts actually building the relationships between the township officials, between all the partners, because all of those people are involved in the process to find out what their opinion is of Highland, how they view Highland, and so forth. So you're already starting your relationship building right there. Okay, just to give you an idea, because I've been kind of talking in very non-specific terms here, is I looked around to see if I could find a branding web page that would give you an example of what I'm talking about. And this web page is very important because this is the thing that communicates everything that's going on and the feeling of the township and so forth with all of the people and its visitors. And so what I did was I came up with Traverse City, which had a really good logo, tagline, and brand. And I don't know if you can see it very well from here, but the logo is on the far upper left corner, and it is the round part represents the sun, and then we have the other seasons. The tagline is under Traverse City, True North, and then basically the other aspects, those building blocks, the physical characteristics, emotions, so forth, those are there as part of the brand on the right-hand side. What activities are going on, what's going on with the area restaurants, hotels, all kinds of things. So that's an example of a website using a Place brand. Okay.
Maybe not.
At this point,
Okay.
we have a special guest tonight.
Yes, we have a special guest. We have worked with her before, but we wanted her to be able to give you a little bit more concrete information, her experience with Place branding project, and what came about from that. So, Ms. Colleen Rosso, if I could introduce you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me here. I was formerly with Heartland Township. I no longer am, so I just want to make it clear that I'm not speaking for Heartland Township. We went through this process about 2 years ago. It is a very intense process, but for us, the payoff was significant. You already have sort of a group that works together with your library. We didn't have that. We were extremely siloed in our activities and in our events. So the branding really brought us all together under one brand. It's been very successful for us. So for example, we launched an event, Winterfest, about 3 years ago. That event would not have happened without the branding because everybody was willing to come to the event, bring their resources under the brand. If we'd asked them to bring the resources under the township, that would not have happened. So we took our brand, we went through the branding exercise. I will tell you that just give you a forewarning, your branding expert is not going to come back with the winner the first time. If he does, you won the lottery, and that's great. So just if you hire somebody, be very patient with them because every time they come to you with something and you give them more feedback, that informs their next creative endeavor. So I just, because we went through that quite a few times, but we ended up with something we were really happy with, and our community was really happy with. We got tremendous response to it. One of the things I'll also, advise you is that you have to have a plan for what you're doing with the brand. A lot of people come up with a logo, they come up with a great tagline, they pat themselves on the shoulder, and that's it. So for us, it was a heavy social media presence. It was a very strong video presence. So Heartland Township has about 15,000 people living in it. Our videos that were branded under the Friendly by Nature brand, we're getting 12 and 13,000 people liking them. So we knew that it went pretty far outside of our community. And we got responses from as far away. People would comment from Farmington Hills. Just seems like a great place to live, and that's exactly what we were looking for. Your partners will be very important. For us, it was the library, the chamber, Heartland Consolidated Schools, and the Township. So our brand lives on every one of those pages. It lives on most of the collateral. The schools promise us that it's going to live on the billboards this year. But that kind of partnership is what's critical to making it work. I applaud you for doing that from the beginning, because if you had done it on your own, it wouldn't have worked. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I think you're doing a great thing. If you look at any of the, I'm sure you guys follow all of the civic kind of trades, they're all saying this is what you need to do to be special. You'll be seeing Heartland Township putting up specialty signs before too long. So we'll be having gateway signs at all of our entrances, Heartland Friendly by Nature with our logo. And we do the same thing that you're planning to do. Our township logo is only for township business. We use the Heartland Friendly by Nature logo for everything else. Answer any questions?
Colleen, thank you. I mean, you have been so helpful to us. Colleen's been kind of our mentor. This is probably the 4th time that we've spent some time together, and just to hear how they went about it, and I think the biggie that helped all of us was each individual partner's logo is, for example, the township especially, the township logo is for township business. It's the specifics. It's what do I need for my permit? When can I pay my taxes? That kind of thing. The Heartland Friendly by Nature logo, it was the fun things. It's what's happening in my community, what makes it tick, where can I meet people, that kind of thing. So that really helped us move forward, and
our community received it very well, and we're, I think, very similar to you in demographic and size, so I'm sure your community will feel the same way.
Were there any surprises, I mean pleasant surprises perhaps, that came out of all of this and pulling everybody together?
The relationships that we built with our 4 partners. So when I first started there were silos. The groups did not meet. They did not coordinate on anything. And by the time I left, we had created a Partners in Progress committee. They all groups meet together. They meet once a month, and they move forward together, as opposed to everybody kind of plowing their own path. So that was a big movement for our township, and it's paid off in spades.
we just feel like, I mean, you stop competing and you start working together.
Right. And also just taking off the blinders, that you're moving in this direction and not looking to see where everybody else is moving to, and see how you can combine resources. Our Winterfest has done very well, even though the weather has not cooperated in the last 2 years at all, in part because of the schools. And the schools, I'm sure Huron Valley is the same way, it's very protective of how you communicate with their folks. Without this partnership, we would have never been able to communicate with the families in the schools. We had just sent them a flyer, they would not have used it. So they've been a really important partner for us.
You mentioned web and video. How are you using that?
We have several videos. So we have a YouTube channel. We use it on our social media sites. Our partners have been terrific about sharing those videos. So we do it a lot for our events, like our Winterfest. We did a kind of a Friday Night Lights video all about the football game. I was at the football game, and I looked at the video and I thought, well, that wasn't the same football game I was at. That was really awesome. We lost terribly that night. But it gives people a sense of pride in their own community. I mean, we looked at it as, yes, could this branding, could these videos, could this website, could that attract more people to our community? We hope so. But more importantly, is it going to make the people in our community increase their pride in where they live? And we think that it accomplished that.
Are the businesses buying into this, or is there any way of tying it together with local businesses?
We did. So we created a Heartland Friendly by Nature sticker and a Shop Heartland. So when I left, we had just launched the Shop Heartland initiative, trying to get people to shop locally. So if you go to Heartland, you'll see that on quite a bit of the doors for the businesses. And they've also been great in helping us with events and supporting that. Again, in a way I'm not sure they would have done without the brand.
Thank you so much.
My
Anybody else?
pleasure.
Thank you, Colleen.
Good luck, everybody. Good luck to you too.
Maybe we'll come back to you crying. So I mentioned to you a little bit earlier that we want to proceed with hiring a place branding consultant. And so we are requesting two things. We would like to be designated as an authorized advisory committee, and we would also like to put out a request for qualifications for a place branding consultant so that we can interview these people and make a selection for hiring and then proceed with the project. Questions about anything at all? Okay, thank you very much.
I was worried about branding. Does that hurt people or does that drive them away?
No, it's supposed to make you happy.
We're not branding the people.
No, no.
No, tattoo you. There is a line item in the budget for this particular purpose, and so it was considered in advance to make sure that the money was there to be able to go forward with this. So this, I think what we probably would need to do on this, just for common sense, is that anybody has any discussion, we should discuss it, but I think we probably should consider our attorney to, we can designate an authorized advisory committee, but I'm not sure that's an actual term that, if anybody has any comment on that. I think it's a great idea. I wouldn't have stood up for it in advance, and we probably still would. We wouldn't have had 2.5 years of a round table that's still together. So, anybody like to comment on that component of it?
Are we looking to take action on it?
Well, I think to take action, we would have to have some language that we wouldn't want to have to maybe change later. So maybe the thing to do is to get the language together, and then also probably write up a formal request for the RFQ, so that they're on the board, in the board packet for the next meeting.
We could take action in supporting this, subject to future terminology. You know, that
It might be better to keep it clean from the start.
okay, all right.
We've had a couple things we've done in the past 4 years that we ended up having to kind of shuffle around. I would prefer to have it right from the get-go than to stain it, but I really, the presentation was very good. I really appreciate that, and you know, I think every one of us, if you want to take an opportunity to give a comment, positive or whatever, I think it's worthy at this point. But
Well, I will just say that I joined the committee when I started here in November, and it's been great to get to know the group and see, and we also have a representative from the schools and a couple other people popping in. And it's great to see everybody talking together and working together, and I'm excited about what's being discussed, and I hope to see it go forward.
Tammy, the representative of the school, did they share with you what's going on there too, that they were working on that same kind of a project?
Not since I've been there, maybe they discussed it before I started there.
Because I know that was something that they were working on.
I would, one thing I would be, and we'll make sure we talk to Shelley about that, but another thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about is Peter Worthman offered, he's one of our citizens, has offered to facilitate this group for us. And there is no way that we could have moved ahead like this without Peter's guidance. Peter is an HR at Ford Motor Company, and he does improv comedy in his retirement for kicks and giggles. So we're very lucky to have him, and he just can't give enough to our community. So it's a good group.
all right, so I will say to the committee that at the next board meeting we'll have the documents put together to be able to put this to a vote, so that we have it all our I's dotted and T's crossed, and we can make it happen right then and there. So appreciate the presentation very much. Diane, good job.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is the discussion of financial reports. And that's with our auditors. So, I'd like to introduce Brian Camilleri, who used to be on our account at what is now Rumsey's position, Rumsey Abdullah. And did I pronounce that correctly?
Yep.
And there are auditors. Rumsey's been here this past couple of weeks. Seems like a week or 2 weeks.
Week and a half now.
They've been buried in that little room where we go once in a while, and it's like a little cooker in there sometimes. But they're diligently looking over every little digit we've got in our books. But tonight's program is kind of as it's called Finance 101 for a learning session for our board to understand maybe better about how finances, financial reports and the budgets work. So on that note, I will turn it over to you, and you just let me know when you want to flick the
Okay, will do. Well, thank you very much for having us. Like Supervisor Hamel said, I was your audit manager for about 10 years until the township got tired of me and kicked me out, and Rumsey took over. But my partner, Pam Hill, is out of town. She would normally be making this presentation with Rumsey instead. But since I am an alum of your audit team, I'm the right person to come back and talk with you. Following the previous presentation, I'm a little bit nervous because this is a little bit drier, probably not quite as exciting as the community moving forward together, because most of what we're going to talk about is looking backwards. Most of financial reporting is not spent planning the future, but rather reflecting on the past and summarizing what just happened. So Rumsey's going to go through the majority of these slides. I'll drop some color commentary in where applicable, but as we're going through, if something that we say doesn't make sense, if you have a follow-up question, you don't have to wait till the end, please. I mean, anyone, audience or a member of the board, let's make this as interactive as possible, and hopefully we won't bore the pants out of anybody here.
I'd just like to let you know I'm married to a CPA, and a lot of people don't realize that they're quite colorful at home. So they have to put on these suits and tone down for our operation here. So,
Well, thank you. And I will say, after hearing, was Heartland's tagline "friendly by nature"? So I think, I'm just throwing a suggestion out there. Perhaps fiscally responsible by nature. So, and as Brian mentioned, of course, we do have materials prepared, but we can always, and there's printed copies for you to kind of take and study from. But the more important thing is I want to make sure that we're addressing any questions and concerns that you have. So, as Brian again mentioned, feel free to jump in at any point and ask questions. So what we're going to cover today is we're basically going to look at why municipal financial statements are so much longer than if you're used to a standard business or a corporation. What are the financial statements trying to communicate? And what is important for you specifically to look at in the financial statements? Now, much of or at least when I'm referring to the financial statements, in the general sense, I'm referring to the annual audited financial statements. However, this does also apply to your monthly financial statements that you receive in your board packet. So I'll try to kind of speak to both of those reports that you're receiving. So the purpose of actually the financial statements themselves, the audited annual financial statements, have two components. The first is going to focus on the government-wide financial statements. And this is intended to demonstrate on if the current taxpayers, it demonstrates the level of service that the current taxpayers paid for. And the best way to put it is it incorporates all services, including long-term assets. If you had roads, which I know the township doesn't, it would be incorporated in that.
But all the physical assets, the building, the equipment, everything that you can't necessarily pick up and put in your pocket. And all of these things are assets of the township, but they're not included in your budget other than the point that you paid for them.
Mm-hmm. So that's why you wouldn't see something like depreciation expense in your fund-based statements, which is the second component of included in the financial statement. So there's the government-wide, which is big picture, long-term assets, long-term debt, and then there's the fund-based component, which is looking at more of a what is available for the township to spend, and it focuses more on the short-term period in terms of how was the money spent in the current period. So I know we throw the term fund around a lot, but to kind of back up a little bit, so in the private sector, a fund can mean many different things. It can mean LLC that was set up for tax purposes, or it can mean something else. But in the public sector, essentially, a fund is set up to track a certain revenue source separately from the general fund. So then what is the general fund? The general fund is essentially the fund that everything else falls into, and the general operating, it's where the general operating of the township runs through.
So the idea kind of goes back to pre-computers, when your local tax collector was walking around with a cigar box or a couple cigar boxes. And so that's how we kept track of the different money that came in and what we were going to do with it. The money came in for this purpose and went into this cigar box, and if it came in from over here, it went into another one, and that's how we kept them separate. That concept carries over to today. So if you're a business, you really have one line of business. Ford makes cars. Coke sells Coke. It's just one thing. But a township or a city or a village or a county, they do a variety of things. So you've got separate money coming in for police, and so that money can only be spent on police. So we have a police fund. Same thing with fire. There are other project funds or money that we're going to use just to pay debt service. And so we segregate these separate lines of business, as it were, or separate services, into its own fund. So we can separately keep track of the money that came in for that purpose and then demonstrate how it was spent only for its intended purpose. Anything that doesn't fall into one of those very specific buckets goes into the catch-all that is the general fund. So the general fund has 50 different things that go into it and probably 100 different things that come out of it, whereas these other particular funds are very specific as to what we're accounting for.
Perfect slide. Getting into this one, so this slide shows the 3 different categories of fund types that you can have, and then within each category, there's it's kind of separated additionally into other additional types, subcategories that you can have. So governmental funds are going to be primarily most of the township's funds, and in a couple of slides we'll take a look at specifically which funds the township has. But the next category is proprietary funds. The most common proprietary fund is a water and sewer fund. However, the township does not have that, so it's the entire category of proprietary funds the township does not have, which makes the financial statements actually less complex than they would be if the township had them. And then the third category is fiduciary funds, and the township does have some fiduciary funds. This includes funds that are set up in a trustee capacity. So if money is being held and then paid out for on behalf of a certain entity like the library, that's what it would be for, or actually the senior center. The other kind of fiduciary fund would be the OPEB trust fund, the other post-employment benefit trust fund that has been set up for retiree health care.
So actually, let's go back to that slide. So the governmental funds, speaking as if I were the township, it's our money to spend on whatever the township is looking to do, to accomplish, and it's primarily driven by property taxes. So property taxes are the #1 source of revenue for a governmental fund, whether it's a general fund, police or fire fund, it's the #1 source. And usually, if you have a dedicated millage like for police or for fire, it can only go to that thing. But a general operating millage has no restrictions. You can spend it on whatever service that particular fund needs. Now the second, proprietary funds, still our money. We can spend it on a particular purpose, but it's driven by charges for service to a user. So whereas everybody pays property taxes based on the value of their home, for a proprietary fund, it is a charge for service. So there is a direct correlation. If you use the service, you pay for the service. If you don't use the service, there's no cost to you. The fiduciary funds, it's not our money. We are holding money for someone else. because we are a large enough entity, people can trust us, we're an institution, but we're going to hold on to that money for a retiree health care fund or a pension fund, even though we're holding the money and it might be reported on the township financial statements, it's somebody else's. It's the retirees, it's the future retirees, or it's the library or the seniors. It's another group that because we're big enough and secure enough, we're going to hold and protect their money for them.
Actually, the trash pickup would be a proprietary fund, wouldn't it? Or does that fit differently?
So trash is one of those that goes, sometimes it goes that way, sometimes it goes the other way. It depends on really, is it meant to cover 100% of the cost by the users always? And so trash sometimes gets a subsidy, whether it's money or it's just in-kind contribution of the time and effort of the people that work for the township. And so quite often it doesn't really support itself 100% because you're not paying the full cost of the service that general fund provides. Whereas water and sewer, there's actually case law that says water and sewer has to pay its own way. We can't use it for anything else.
Okay, so for the public to understand, the $150 that you pay for trash does not, in fact, cover the entire cost, and that's why doesn't fit into that proprietary fund.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, it is a charge for service.
Right.
If you didn't get garbage pickup, if you didn't have a dumpster or a can that came, whether it was picked up, you may not necessarily have to pay.
Okay. Thank you. Next.
Yep, next. So on this slide, we actually list the township's funds as of 2015. So I know there's been actually two changes technically, because the water fund is closed out now. But as you can see on here, the governmental funds that the township reports, the first one would be the general fund. Then there's a separate fund for fire operating, police, refuse, capital improvement, library, water, fire capital, and road. And on some of them, you'll see it says the word non-major. Essentially, what that is the result of is there's governmental accounting standards, accounting rules require certain funds to be presented as major, meaning they're in the front statements. So if you're looking at the annual financial statements, certain funds will be presented, and then there's a column for other non-major funds. So the distinction of being a major fund can either be made by the township, if the township wants to present it as a major fund, or by default, there is a formula that accounting rules require that you go through that determines if something is a major fund or not. And for the most part, the general fund is always going to be presented as a major fund, but all of the other funds will be subject to this formula to determine if it's a major fund or not a major fund. Yeah. It doesn't make it any less important. It's just how the formula.
Yeah, it's literally a mathematical calculation that determines it. Now, something to note about that list of funds.
Do you want that one back?
That's perfect. Right there. You have to have a general fund. Every community has a general fund, and that is required. But all the other funds are actually they're actually optional. You could take all of that activity and record it in the general fund. The problem, if you were to do that, is you lose a lot of the transparency. And if you lose transparency, then you lose accountability. The way it's set up, with having a separate fire fund and a separate police fund and separate so on, is that you can see this is the money that we, the residents, gave you, the township, to spend on a particular purpose, and I can see exactly how you did it. If we were to lump them all together in general fund, it would be legal, that would be fine, but you might lose some of that perspective. Because at the end of the year, we can see in each of those funds how much money's left over. Whereas if we did it the other way, it might get blended in and you may not be able to see it as much. So this would actually be a preferable presentation from an accountability and transparency standpoint. Now, you could get to the point where there's too many funds and that you end up losing some of the message because you've got money spread out all over the place. So in my role with some of my other clients, where I'm not the auditor, where I'm actually part of their finance department, I've come in and suggested that you consolidate some of your funds. So one particular small city in Wayne County, I came in, they had over 30 funds, and the first thing we did was close 14 of them because it was either redundant or it was mixing the message, And so by taking some of them and mashing them together, then it was a clearer picture for both the residents and for the city council to understand where their money was going.
And then on this slide, we also have a continued breakout. So you can see under proprietary funds, there's no enterprise funds, no internal service funds. Under the fiduciary funds, the Post-Employment Benefits Trust qualifies as a trust fund. And then there's also the Highland Adult Activity Center Fund, the current tax fund, and the special escrow funds that are reported as agency funds. And again, those are presented there as Brian kind of made, they're not the township's money, they're just being held in a fiduciary capacity. And to kind of piggyback off one of the comments, I don't live in Highland Township, but I do have a crazy neighbor, and there was, in my community, there was a millage for police and fire, and of course, he was ranting once about the police and fire millage is actually being used to pay for the mayor's car and all this stuff, and I actually pulled out a financial statement, and I said, if you look in this column, you know, you picked the wrong neighbor to complain to, but you can see the revenue that's being separated into this fund, and then you can see that every category that it's being spent on. So in these different funds, going back to the transparency thing, especially when there's a dedicated tax millage, you can see exactly where it's going. If you have a special grant fund, that's going to track the grant revenue that's coming in. It's going to show auditors or the awarding agency that's giving you the grant. It's going to show what you're spending it on, and to show that there are no transfers going to other funds, and if there is a transfer, it's typically it should be explained in the footnotes of the financial statement to explain why it's allowable and legal. Component units is a term that I think often gets confused. Essentially, it's a legally separate organization for which the township is fiscally responsible or financially responsible. There are two component units for Highland Township. The first one you're probably familiar with, of course, the DDA. The second one, the brownfield, is actually, there's no activity in it, but I believe legally it is set up and there just hasn't been activity in it. So you probably won't see that in the financial statements, but the DDA is a legally separate entity. So the key takeaway from that first section would be to take time to learn about the township's funds. In the annual financial statement, which I do have copies of the 2015 financial statement, and that was what we would have audited last year. What we're auditing right now, we actually will be presenting to you, hopefully in not the next meeting, but probably the one after that, for the final audit of 2016 numbers. However, I do have copies of last year's, if you do not have one that you can read and get a full understanding and better picture of the annual activity for all funds. So fund balance, what is fund balance? Accounting 101 tells us it's assets minus liabilities. It's in a business term, it's the equity, it's the residual equity that's left over after subtracting liabilities from the assets.
Yeah, I've also heard it referred to as our savings account, our rainy day fund. It's what's left from what we have minus what we owe.
And I know that in your monthly financial statements, so it's the next question is the fund balance available to be spent as our governing body sees fit? And the answer to that is maybe. Essentially, there are 5 different types of fund balance that you can have, and each one has different aspects as to how you can spend it. And I've actually handed out a separate sheet that defines these 5 separate components of fund balance. Now, I know that on some of your monthly financial statements that might use the term designated. Designated was a term that was used before GASB 54, GASB statement number 54 was implemented in 2009. So the terminology is outdated.
We used to use designated and reserved. Mm-hmm. Those words don't exist anymore in governmental financial statements, although they are used quite often just based out of habit. But designated and reserved doesn't mean anything anymore. These are the terms that actually mean what we can do with our fund balance, if anything.
Mm-hmm. Now the handout has much more detailed definitions, but I'll just go very high level. The first is non-spendable, and it's pretty much what it says. It's fund balance and it's non-spendable form. So if you're sitting right now and you just paid for a prepaid asset, or you're paying for something that you're not going to use until the future year or the future month, that would go into non-spendable fund balance. It's not going to be regular fund balance because it's not available for spending. The money has been spoken for, essentially.
Yeah. If you have inventory sitting on your balance sheet, you can't spend inventory. You already spent money to acquire it. And so even if you have equity related to that inventory, it doesn't do you much good other than just using it up. So we carve out a piece of the fund balance to say, even though in total your savings is this much, you can only spend this much. And so we carve out that piece as non-spendable fund balance.
The next category would be restricted fund balance, and restricted means it's legally restricted by an external from the, or outside of the township. So it's either an awarding agency, the federal government, the state of Michigan, or some other legal restriction outside of the township restricting itself, basically.
Yeah. If you issued bonds, usually within the terms of the bonds, it says you're going to build X with it, and so you are legally bound to only spend it on whatever that X thing is. Same way with when you have a millage for police and for fire, you can only spend that money on police and fire, and so any money that's left over at the end of the year is restricted. We can't take it into the general fund and do something else with it. It is restricted to that purpose and that purpose only.
The next category would be committed. So this is going to be like less restricted, is how I would call it, because the committed is going to be essentially the restriction is being placed by the highest level of authority within the governmental entity itself. So essentially that's the board. So if the board makes a resolution to set aside money for something, that's committed fund balance.
Once you commit, that is locked in place, and the township can only do that thing that you just committed it for until such time as you either do it or as a board collectively decide, doesn't have to be unanimous, but as a board decide, we're going to uncommit that money to do something else, or we're not going to create a purpose for it, we're not planning on doing that commitment any longer. But it's at that board level.
The next level would be a little bit less restricted than that, and it would be when GASB 54 was written, it was essentially written with, if there was another type of distinction you would like to make that wasn't as high as the board. And this is unique to every local government. At some places this is assigned. In this case, at Highland Township, this has been assigned by resolution to collectively the treasurer, the clerk, and the supervisor, all three. And then for assigning fund balance and unassigning fund balance, that does not have to be through formal resolution. It could be done with, I believe, with just a journal entry.
Yeah.
That's accurate.
Yeah, the idea is that in order to commit something, we have to get all 7 of you together and have a discussion and do it formally, and it locks it into place. But just due to timing and convenience, sometimes we want to just earmark something in the financial statements and just say, yeah, we're going to use this $100,000 for this. We don't need to put it to the full board because we don't want to lock ourselves in, but at the same time, we want to tell the user of the financial statement that we have an intention. Because that's really all an assignment is. It's an intention. And it can change tomorrow without us having to vote, without us having to put it on the agenda. It's just a real temporary placeholder on the balance sheet.
So that's it for, oh, I'm sorry, the most important category is unassigned, so this does not have any restriction on it. And it can be used by the township as deemed fit.
Yeah, so really, if it doesn't fall into one of the first 4 buckets from the top down, it's just unassigned automatically. Yes?
We had the old terms reserved and designated. Now, where do those, where do they fall under the new?
So designated would have been similar to committed or assigned, in terms that there's no outside our 4 walls telling us you have to do X.
Okay.
Whereas reserved would have been some combination of restricted and non-spendable.
Okay.
So it's actually, there's a rule or a law or an entity that tells us we can only do X.
Okay.
And in some cases, so like in the police fund, it's always gonna be restricted now, so unless it's not spendable. So in that case, I know that, because we were talking about earlier, some of the
Right,
older
right.
accounts, so you can almost just rename the account from designated or reserved to restricted.
Okay, that's what we were concerned, like, what are the new terms that we should be
Mhm.
using? Because we still have some reserved and designated.
Yeah, so it was a little loosey-goosey before GASB 54. And so we could put money over here into this fund for whatever purpose, and we'll put money over here as kind of a savings account for different things. GASB 54 made the rules a little bit stricter. The reason being is they wanted to really be able to compare apples to apples. So if we put money into another fund and we just call it designated or whatever, like, what does that really mean? How far are we locked into doing it? With this terminology, I mean, it tells the reader exactly what we can or can't do with it and how long that is in place for. Also, by making unassigned only an option for general fund, it means that if we're going to put money aside in a capital improvement fund or a special revenue fund, there has to be a very clearly defined purpose and reason for why we are doing it.
Okay.
So in a special revenue fund like the police or the fire, it's got to be either one of the top 4 categories. Most likely, it's going to be restricted.
Mhm. And then we, as part of the audit every year, we do kind of true up all the definitions, and we have a matrix that shows every fund and what it falls into, and we'll be providing that as we're finishing up here with the audit, so that you can just rename the accounts so that it's in accordance with the updated definition.
Okay, I was just curious of what category they fell in.
Yeah.
No, new and old.
So, sure. The key takeaways for fund balance is that fund balance is the measure of the financial health for an individual fund. Of course, if it's in a deficit, that's a red flag. If you're even approaching a deficit, that's a red flag. Fund balance is not cash. Brian mentioned it's referred to sometimes as a savings account, but I know in some cases that somebody would look straight to fund balance and think that that's what's available for spending. Of course, it's, hopefully the key takeaway is that's not always the case.
Because it's cash plus receivables minus payables, so it's not a one-to-one relationship there. But now, so here's where we come to the part where we really earn our money for this presentation. By the way, it was free. The question that we get, all my clients, every year is, how much fund balance should we have? Do we have the right amount? And the answer is, and it's not a very satisfying answer, but the answer is, it depends. There isn't a clear-cut definition or calculation that I can point to say, this is exactly how much fund balance you should have, and you're either short or ahead of that number. There are some rules of thumb to go by. There are some guidelines, and so we want to talk about those, but there isn't a right number. It's a lot more a feel and circumstance that dictates how much you should or should not have, and if you're ahead or behind what that number is. But zero is not an option. I had one client that wanted to run their fund balance down to zero to prove that we're not wasting any taxpayer money. That at the end of the year we spent exactly what we took in, and there's nothing left. So we didn't overcharge you and we didn't undercharge you, the residents. We charged you exactly what we needed. And I almost came out of my chair. I was so upset. Like, this is terrible. You cannot think like this. There's a reason to have fund balance. You have to have something in the bank or in reserve in case life happens. So, and then also our customers or our residents typically pay us, the community, at a slower rate than what we, the community, have to pay our vendors. And so our employees have to get paid. The people that deliver supplies, they have to get paid or else they will stop working with us. But your taxes are only going to come out a certain part of the year. Certain fees for service only come when service has been delivered. But we need to have something here to tide us over until those other events happen.
We ready for the next slide?
Yep.
So so kind of piggybacking off of that, so it's when you're arriving at that decision, you really should consider risk tolerance, how much risk you want to have. Of course, the lower fund balance you want to have, the higher risk you're running of when life happens, when Michigan weather happens, when things happen. And the known upcoming spending, so if there's certain improvements that you know that you're going to have to be making. And that kind of ties into what I'll be touching on in a couple slides, which is if you have a 5-year plan or something projecting forward, that's something that you can incorporate when deciding your fund balance. And then when you have a tax, the fact that the tax year is different than the fiscal year. So in December, I know the township levies the upcoming year's tax levy. So the 2015 or 2016 budget was levied in December 2015. So it's kind of knowing that you're going to have that front loaded so that you have it available for spending during the year.
So now if you were a 3/31 year ending township with a December levy, you've got to have extra money in the bank because you're going to get to the end of your fiscal year and you need to have enough money. And so there's that gap. But with you, you're getting a lot of your money the month before your year starts. So you don't necessarily need to have as much as that comparable 3/31 community. But there are these other factors that you have to consider as well.
Mm-hmm.
So size of your budget is certainly a factor. So the bigger you are, the less percentage of spending you need to have in the bank. A good example is the city of Livonia, where I grew up. So their general fund's a $50 million budget. They don't need to have 40% of $50 million in the bank because an event that size is not going to happen. They're very content to have 10 or 12% because $5 or $6 million in the bank for that community is just fine to handle any kind of natural disaster that they're going to have. The smaller you are, well, you need to have a higher percentage because, if it comes down to, $300,000 is not a lot of money. You have a sinkhole, you have some kind of problem, it takes a substantial amount more. Actually, Rumsey's got a pretty good analogy that he just told me today that I liked.
It's like tipping. It's like you tip 15%, but if you go to a diner and you have a cup of coffee, you can't leave 30 cents. So the smaller your base is, you kind of got to think about you got to ignore the percentage and look at the actual number and see if it makes sense or not. Amy, did you have a question?
And then if they're delivering and it's Michigan weather and it's in the winter, then you gotta tip them more.
Oh, yeah.
No, I was gonna say, so we handed out some financials, for the post audit 2015 and then also for the month of February of 2016. And you're gonna see where that fund balance varies, and it's much more like in February than it is in the post audit of the final year of 2015, and that's just what we're talking about. And you were talking about how it just depends on that time. It's that snapshot of when the money's coming in and when it's going to be spent. So it may look higher one time, but it's because we got to spend it all.
It's got to carry you for the next year. So another factor that's not unique, but is not quite as common, the fact that you do have a separate police and fire fund. So many communities would combine those activities with general fund. And so when they're doing the calculation of how much fund balance they should have, the spending of those departments is part of the calculation. So if Highland only looks at their general fund, they're ignoring the fact that there's several $1 million a year spending in the 2 public safety funds. And so I would really look at the 3 of them together when figuring out about how much we should have, because general fund has more than police or fire does, but if you look at them all together, it changes that calculation.
And if you can jump ahead to 19, actually, the township has actually gone through the process of putting together a fund balance policy and a minimum fund balance policy. Oh, I'm sorry, 19. Yep, that one right there. And it was passed by resolution 2011, maybe off a year or two, but so the township is kind of proactive on this measure and does have procedures in place to look at this every year and then decide which way to go with it.
Yes, I really think that this is best practice for a community. So you've established that there is a minimum that you feel comfortable with, that you don't want to dip below it, but at the same time there is a maximum that if you get ahead of that, well, why do we really need to have this much money? And let's reprogram it to things such as paying our legacy costs or paying down debt. So you're constantly looking at it, considering it, and then deciding, are we within the band, or are we getting close to one of the edges of that band, and we have to do something about it. And if you hit the low end of the band, it's like, okay, well, maybe we need to cut back on some spending. If we hit the high end of the band or are approaching it, then it's like, well, are there longer term projects that we could accomplish? Is there a reason why we're accumulating what we have? So I would say of the 20 communities I work with, I would say probably less than 5 would have this, but I really do believe that that having this kind of policy in place is best practice.
And I'd say many of them too are kind of still playing catch up from the '08, downfall. So they would love it. They would love to be at this point, but right now they're if the ones that do have policies, they're lower, and their goal is to get it bigger, to get back to a sustainable amount, so that if we did have another crash like in 2008, you'd be able to survive without slashing township services. If we can skip ahead to 21 in the interest of time, there's a little bit more to wrap up there. All right, so I think it's also important to look at the budget, and it's very important how you're looking at the budget. If you're looking at in the private world for a company, a budget is often looked at as a goal, as something you strive for, and if you get it, great. If you don't, it's kind of viewed differently in the public sector. In the public sector, the budget is the legal authority of what you're allowed to spend. So it's much more important that you're within that budget, but it's also the maximum of what you're allowed to spend. So the expectation really is that your departments should be coming in under budget, so that if they are coming in under budget, it's not that, oh well, let's tweak the budget a little bit. That's actually what's supposed to happen in terms of them coming in under budget with a little bit of a little bit of room there.
Yeah. So a lot of times, communities will say, well, our DPW department spent 95% of their budget this year. We should cut their budget because they don't need it. And I always say, well, no. You gave them the 100% because they might need it, and it's illegal if they spend 1 penny more than the budget, which is also why we have budget amendments. On a general rule of thumb, I would say is somewhere between 2 and 5% is what your departments will spend underneath their budget. If it's much more than that, then maybe you're giving them too much room. That they don't need that much room. But you should expect them to come in 2 to 5%. If they are spending right up to the budget every year, what might be happening, and I'm not suggesting that it is here at all, but a lot of departments I've seen in other communities comes to the end of the year, the last month, it's like, how much money I got left? All right, well, I'm going to buy a new truck, and I'm going to buy a new this and a new that, because I've got room. And if I don't spend it, they're going to take it away from me. So there's a reason not to do that. Obviously, you don't want them to be spending it necessarily, but at the same time, you don't want the threat of you taking away their budget to prompt that activity.
If you jump to 23, this is one that I hear get mixed up a lot, but a balanced budget does not mean one where the revenues and the expenses are equal, or expenditures. A balanced budget is considered, a budget is considered balanced if the ending fund balance is positive. So it is okay to have a budget that expenditures exceed revenues if there's some planned spending that year. But as long as the ending fund balance is positive, then it's considered a balanced budget.
Yeah, and it's okay to spend fund balance. You can't spend it all the time on operational things because then you'll eventually run out and then you'll be in a deficit. But when there's a capital project, capital improvement, a once every 5 year, once every 10 year, once every 20 year kind of thing that comes up, in that 1 year, yeah, absolutely. It's there to be used. One of our retired partners, he always explained it as being, it's like saving for your kid's college fund. You're saving money every year because 10 years down the road, you're going to spend a bunch of money in those 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and you're not going to have enough cash flow in those years to pay the tuition. So you save up early, knowing that you're going to spend more than you have coming in those later years. Really, government's not any different. If we're going to have a large-scale capital project, or even just a new fire truck that costs $200,000 or more, Depends on the truck, but yeah, I mean, it could be $1 million. You need to save leading up to that, or else you're going to finance it and then be paying interest to somebody else. So, which is fine as well if that's what you have to do.
If we could jump back to 26, and then we're halfway there. Kidding.
Just kidding.
So the final, so really considering budgeting is obviously a very important tool in your role. But another important financial tool, and the most, I think that every community in excellent financial health uses a multi-year budget or a 5-year projection, something that forecasts out what your strategic views are. And I know, because Tammy and I were talking about that earlier, it's not always in numbers, sometimes it's in objectives and what you hope. And that helps in the budgeting process. That helps in knowing how much fund balance should I have question.
Yeah, Oakland County does a rolling 3-year budget every year. So every decision that they make this year, they figure out what it costs 3 years down the road. Because sometimes you make a decision now, and if you're not looking, it's got a heck of a lot bigger impact than you think, just the way it's going to grow exponentially in some cases. City of Ferndale this year is doing a full 5-year budget. Now those future years it's crystal ball, it's who knows what's really going to happen. And they know that. It's subject to change. We're not locking ourselves into something, but we want to make sure we're looking down the road to see what direction we're pointing at.
Well, that concludes the prepared material, at least. I wanted to make sure that we can go through any questions. Specifically, not only on the annual financial statements, but if there's any questions you have on any accounts in your monthly financial statements that you're not sure what it represents or how it factors in, we'd be happy to answer those.
Are we gonna have like a test, multiple choice?
Every day you're up here making decisions, it's your test.
Yes.
I think what would be good to kind of explain is when we are going from general fund and putting in operating, transferring in, and the do-tos, do-froms, those kind of things. Maybe you could explain that a little bit.
So as we have these different shoe boxes that are now electronic in the computer, sometimes one fund borrows from another fund, either because the borrowing fund didn't have enough money, or just as a convenience of the accounting and where the cash position is at the time. So it's very common and totally acceptable for there to be this inter-fund borrowing, where one fund owes another fund or vice versa. Same way that it's okay in some situations for one fund to give money to another fund, and that's referred to as a transfer. So it's not okay for the police fund with its dedicated police millage to transfer money somewhere else to be used for a different purpose, because we know there are strings on that police money. General fund being unrestricted, unassigned, catch-all, free-for-all revenue, it's okay for general fund to put money into a capital project fund for a project to be named later, even if we don't know what it is. Or it is okay, technically, for general fund to subsidize another activity if another activity fell short. A lot of communities would have a rubbish millage instead of a rubbish charge. Problem with the rubbish millage is it's capped. And so with the decrease in taxable value from 2008, a lot of communities, their rubbish millage no longer supports the rubbish activity. So general fund has to subsidize that, and they do so by literally giving a transfer of money to the rubbish fund, just to make ends meet. So transfers are perfectly fine, provided it's an unrestricted revenue source going somewhere else. You can't transfer restricted money somewhere. Now, you can move restricted money to reimburse the general fund. So what happens in a lot of places is the general fund pays for all the operations. And then we'll take our restricted revenue source and repay general fund for the money you put out. That's not a transfer. That's reimbursing for other expenses. That's totally fine. So you can see money going both ways. but you have to make sure that it's going the right way for the right reason.
That's a good question. That's one of the big, when we're doing an audit risk is always looking for making sure that transfers were allowable, so, and legal. So sometimes if you see a payment going from one fund to another fund, we have to ensure that it was there to reimburse, or if it actually was allowable and what the nature and purpose of the transfer was to begin with.
Does everybody have this down? Do you?
All the students are gone.
Chased them all out. None of them are going into governmental accounting.
Yeah, they weren't accounting students, so.
I'm gonna toss something in. Rumsey and I talked about this earlier today, and it didn't come up, but you did state it, and you showed the percentages of that you would hold for fund balance. And so the comment was sometimes what happens is you'll have somebody in the crowd or a group of people will say, well, you've got all this fund balance, you should give their money back. And I think many of you have seen this chart that Judy Cooper put together, and it shows where the money goes. And I like to pass that out whenever somebody starts questioning, you know, we paid your wages and we did this and we did that. And the irony is that we at 0.6 mils only collect $400,000 in taxes. And
For general fund.
For general fund. Now, the other millages, of course, that's a different thing. But the individuals don't understand the split, and that's what we're trying to get the board to understand these same things. How is this thing divided up? Why can you do this? Why can't you do that? But the key is that Highland Township has one of the lowest millages around, and we've done quite a bit to make sure that we don't raise that. I mean, it can't always last forever, but I mean, it's good that we can get other sources of revenue. That's what people don't understand. Where's the money come from? But you had made the comment that most of your money comes from taxes. Well, it does for the police.
You look at operations as a whole.
Right, but operations in-house, it doesn't.
Correct. Actually, so if your general fund, state share revenue is your number one revenue.
Right.
State share revenue, like its name, comes from the state, but what it actually is sales tax that all of us pay across the state whenever we're buying those types of goods, collected up at the state level and then redistributed down to the local units, primarily based on population. So you're right, for your general fund operations, I think, I'd have to look at the numbers again, but I want to say state shared is 2 to 3 times what your property tax revenue
About
is.
$1.4 million.
Yeah.
$1.4 million compared to 400.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that, anybody have any questions?
And this is great job putting it together. I think it's very helpful to see, especially where it breaks out within each millage done by department.
Yeah. And it answers another question too. So, quite often the audiences I'm speaking to are not as friendly as you are, and some of them might stand up and say, I paid $5,000 in property taxes, and to you, when I'm sitting on their side, and I say, we took the money, but we didn't keep it, because that $5,000 doesn't stay here. That goes to the schools and the county and the community college and the library and the zoo and the DIA and the whoever. We got this much of it. And in this case, we get this much of it here.
Yeah.
The majority goes to these other taxing authorities.
Every day they're in tax collection.
Yeah. What am I getting for $5,000? We didn't keep it. It's not ours.
So on that note, part of the topic for public purposes is the township operating with the board, what happens in this building, is taking the smallest cut pretty much of the taxes. And so what it points out is that we have a library, and our library director's here, that depends totally on millage for money. Police, millage, fire, millage. And when you start to look at it and say, we pay your wages and you're doing this, like, you're saying, I put $5,000 in there. Well, what you did is you made a decision when you went to the polls that you felt the police were worth their weight in gold, and the fire worth their weight in gold, and the library worth its weight in gold. And that's how we need to be sure that the public understands that that's why it's put together the way it is. So that you do have a clear picture of what it takes to operate that police, the fire, the library. And it doesn't get buried in a general fund, so.
Anything else we can do for you today? Other than leave?
My taxes?
Got 3 weeks left.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you.
The next movie is,
Were you within budget for our expenditure for auditing?
I'm not sure what you budgeted this year, but what did we have fixed fees?
Another budget amendment.
if you guys would like to go ahead and leave, you can. I know you've run through a long day, and you had to make that trip out here from Detroit, so thanks again, appreciate it very much. Your staff are precious. I've had a great time with them. They stay focused, and it's no matter how hard I try to do it, they stay focused. And,
that is the key to making them leave, is not be quite so nice. We appreciate the opportunity to serve you.
But we gave them the opportunity. The fire chief cooked lunch. Made lunch. Was that Friday? Monday.
And Friday.
Can't keep track of it. So anyways, so they were able to go over to the fire hall and have lunch, and it was corned beef and cabbage and you name it.
Didn't do that for us when I was.
You guys missed out, so. But anyways, thanks again very much, and pass the word along to whoever is responsible for the other employees that they have done a phenomenal job, and you better give us a good rating.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, next item, where are we? 8A, proposed budget amendments. Would you like to make a motion to approve these amendments?
I would move to, accept the budget amendments as presented.
Support?
Moved and supported. Any discussion? Okay, then vote please.
Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
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 Motion carries.
All right, Amy and Karen, I know you both work on this stuff. Good job on this bookkeeping. Those two guys that were here today and that firm, she has to perform to the ultimate in order for us to come out on top of this, and she's done a fantastic job, so thank you. Both of you. Appreciate it very much. Okay, next item, planning commission appointments. All of you should have received some language from our attorney here that it turns out that in the process that we took for appointing somebody to the planning commission last time, the information that we received initially was incorrect. And what we did do though was by questioning that, and Mary McDonald did question it. She's been here a lot longer than the rest of us have, but by questioning that, it forced our attorney, and I myself went out looking for language that said it was either right or wrong, looking for the answers to it. And there is quite a bit of, I guess you'd call it statutory changes over the years that caused changes in language. So what happened is the language that we had was that a planning commissioner may be appointed from the board, township board, And in 2008, there was a change in the Michigan compiled law, the statute, that threw all of that out and modified it to read that if you were formed under the 1931 Act, then you may appoint, which means you don't have to, you can do something different. If you weren't formed under that, then you shall, which means you must. So we finally found the documents that said we shall. So that means that we have to do two things tonight. One is and I'll just make the motion so we can get this thing rolling here. We need to I'm going to make the motion to rescind the appointment of Russ Tierney from the Planning Commission. And
Support.
Support, good, okay. Anybody have any questions on that? All right, the reason I did choose Mr. Tierney is because he was the one who was on the board previously, and we left him on the board instead of being what they call ex officio. So that was the position that a or a trustee or a board member would take. Okay, the next item is we need to appoint. Oh, we need to vote.
Yeah, I'll start. I vote yes.
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 Motion carries.
Okay, so we rescinded the one member. The next item is an appointment to the Township Board, a board member to the Planning Commission. Today I received requests by Mary Pat to fulfill that position, and I think Mary Pat would be a good, in any case, would be a good individual to take that position, and especially from the point that anybody of us that would take it, that makes 3 weeks out of a month that you have broken up with meetings, so it makes it difficult for board members to take that spot. But so, if that is the case, I would like to make the motion to appoint Mary Pat Chenoweth to be the ex officio member of the Planning Commission.
Support.
Okay, so moved and supported. Vote please.
Mr. Salvia?
Yes.
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 Thank you, Mary Pat.
Motion
Yeah,
carries.
thank you very much. I just want to make a comment about that whole process. We were, another thing that we had done in the last meeting was to, in that one motion where we did all these things, I had talked to our attorney about the process that we had where we had decided to have a board member sit in on the Planning Commission meetings. And Judy Cooper, it was her turn last Thursday, based on what we had proposed. And Judy's comment to me was that she thought it was very helpful and insightful, and enjoyed the thing. And so I asked our attorney, would it be remiss, or would there be any problem with continuing in that process, where we would take the calendar and each board member would have an opportunity to sit at a board meeting or at a Planning Commission meeting? And he said absolutely not. There's nothing. The only thing that you would do is if you were being affected by a vote of the Planning Commission, that you would recuse yourself from it, because you might have property next to you that would do it. But I think that what it does do is it gives the board a really good opportunity to see how the Planning Commission operates. And it would bring us closer to when you see how decisions are made, or decisions we might have to make, you can understand better what the planning commissioners go through. So it doesn't come with a stack of paper in front of us and we have to kind of make a decision based on paper. You can actually put yourself in a position of a commissioner and see what kind of work they have to go through. So we don't have to make a decision on that tonight. It does not have to be a motion to do so. But I would like to poll the board right now to see if they would like to continue doing that or not.
Yes.
I don't mind doing it at all. I mean,
I think it's a good idea.
Mary?
I think it's a good thing for, anytime.
Yeah, right, that's a good thing.
You get the agendas, if you see something of interest or whatever,
Yes.
it's a whole different perspective on what's going on.
I think it gives the board the opportunity to see what fine people there are in the planning.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
There are?
that's quick.
Just saying.
Well, then, I think from that respect, we'll leave that as that's what we'll do going forward, and we'll go with calendar. If anybody has issues, you don't have to be there, but I think it's one of those that, it's a good thing to have our board involved. It's a little bit different, in the ZBA because, I think they need to have their concentration on their specific, this is what we have to address. Where the planning commission gives it, it's a little bit different, it's a lot different, operation, so. And the township board has no control over what the ZBA does in terms of from legal point of view, so. I wanna,
Well, I think it's good that the community knows that we have eyes on something also to support, that we're actually watching out for things. I think that's a good thing. It makes the commission also comfortable that we're there to observe.
and it's better than reality TV. So, all right, so we've accomplished the two things we need to do with the planning commission. Mary Pat, thank you very much. There's at least a one-year term. There's nothing that says it has to be 4 years. It generally is put out there as you would do it for your term. You can do it for a full term, which would be 4 years. So the other members of the planning commission are 3-year terms, but they're staggered, so every year 3 people have to be reappointed. So if it becomes cumbersome or there's an issue, then, and you decide that 1 year is enough, or you want to do 2, then that's your prerogative to let the board know what you want to do, and thanks again, appreciate it. Okay, the next item is new business, resolution to participate in the West Nile virus program. We do that every year. Karen Provo handles that, and so this is doing our due diligence, which is the request for the grant. So we just need to, and the resolution that you see in here is just a copy or a sample of what we did last year. So we'll have to do the same, write the resolution up, and then put the correct dates and so on and so forth in there. The county just needs to see a copy of this resolution that we would be involved.
I would move to approve resolution 17 whatever the next number is, to authorize West Nile Virus Fund expense reimbursement request.
Support.
Okay, moved and supported. Vote please.
Mrs. McDowell?
Yes.
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 Motion carries.
All right, next item, list of bills dated March 22nd, 2017. Motion?
Move to approve the list of bills as presented.
Support.
Moved and supported. Any discussion? Vote please.
All right, Mr. Hill?
Yes.
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 Motion carries.
Just before we, see, the next item would be, public comment, but I'll, wanna make a statement once again for, the board to understand, today, a perfect example of how our accounting software, the updated software we have, has come in extremely handy, is Heidi had asked for some information about an invoice that occurred before, or information that occurred before Amy was even here. And she was able to go in with the software that we have now and pull up the invoice for a set of doors, or accordion doors, that were put in at the activity center. And she got really excited, so I think that was a good thing. And that same software, we're all in an experimental process, or we're learning process, but what happens is, all of the invoices are scanned and put into this software. The fire chief has been doing it. You're pretty happy so far?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's pretty neat. Real-time experience on how much we spent and how much I have left.
And it's been a little bit more work from what my end is used to, but you know, I think the thing is that I'm responsible for expenditures. I'm the one that puts the budget for you guys to vote on, and it really has been much better to see all these invoices because you get a lot more intimate with the budget when you can see. Every time I see this stack of pages and all these things there, I go, wow, that's every month, you know. It's a lot of work, but by having the detail that we have, I think it's going to be one of those things that will make it better for the next batch of people in the next years to understand what we've done and how we've done it, and it just is going to get better and better. So I'm glad you got excited. To be honest with you, I went, yeah, kind of myself. I hate numbers, so it's this has been fun for me to learn this process. So, all right, on that note, public comment.
I would like to let everybody know that we're getting ready to redevelop a Facebook page for the township in order to get some information out through that channel. And so if there's anyone that has any input or advice on that, I'm open ears. But we've considered a lot of aspects about it and strategies that we can use to make it effective and keep everything going the direction we want it to go.
I think the key to that is some of the stuff that we have talked about is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Tammy, but what you don't want to do on our end is have the ability to be able to comment. You know, I mean, for the public to comment on what we put in there, because if any of you have paid any attention to Facebook, it can get pretty crazy at times, and the idea is for us to use it as a tool to disseminate valuable information and to keep people aware of what's going on. It's just one of the tools of the community roundtable that we're trying to help promote. And so you just want to be really careful that you don't turn it into a tool where you get people just hacking at you all the time, you know. And we don't need that. It's not that we don't care what people think, it's just not that's not what the use is. The use is to disseminate information and to get it out there as rapidly as possible at times. So, fortunately, we have somebody on board that is a master at Facebook. So,
have you thought about like Twitter at all?
I'm
finally
starting up
the
at
Twitter
3
world.
o'clock. Yeah, no.
Not at this time.
Okay.
We'll
It's
consider that down the
simple.
road.
That's a
Right.
simple thing.
Right, but it has a lot more issues with it. One of the things you have to consider with social media is the fact that you need to archive what's going on, because it could be subject to FOIA, and that includes people responding in any way. So there would be a lot more to it with Twitter.
Makes sense. Yep. Okay. I was thinking about that.
Any other public comment?
I would like to thank Amy also, because as you just stated about the accordion doors, that was before my being a director, before you being supervisor, and it was I had no documentation. It was done by the previous supervisor's office and the assistant at that point in time. So to find that paperwork was like, yeah, what box are you gonna give me to look through? Or how many? And, yeah, when that came across my email today, it was just like, sort of emotional. So, thank you. Thank you all for finding that package of software.
All right, anybody else? Meeting adjourned.
I'm not gonna say anything from tomorrow, but I'm gonna try.
I'll see you around.
Right.
I'll be here tomorrow.
I only need like
Taking the edge off.